police officer sat alone inside a small roadside café, staring at a photograph that felt heavier than his badge. His uniform was dusty, wrinkled, and stained with exhaustion that no sleep could erase. For 48 endless hours, his young son had been missing, swallowed by silence, unanswered calls, and dead ends that led nowhere. Every minute stretched longer than the last, and hope slipped through his fingers like dry sand in the desert heat. The world around him continued as if nothing had happened, but inside his chest, everything was collapsing. Then the bell above the cafe door rang softly, cutting through the quiet like a blade. A little girl stepped inside,
My dog
no older
can
than
find
8,
your missing son.
her hand gripping the collar of a massive German shepherd. The dog moved with calm precision, eyes alert, body tense, as if the room itself carried a hidden truth. She stopped in front of the officer, her voice small but steady, and spoke words that froze every breath in the cafe. She said her dog could find his missing son. The officer barely had time to react before the dog stepped forward, lowered his head to the boy's hoodie, and stiffened suddenly. His muscles locked, his breathing changed, and a low growl rumbled from his chest like a warning. In that instant, everyone felt it. Something terrible had been uncovered, and nothing would ever be the same again. Before this story moves forward into places no one inside that cafe was prepared to face, take a moment to stay connected to what unfolds next. Stories like this travel because people choose to carry them forward, one listener at a time. If moments of courage, loyalty, and impossible hope move you, make sure you support this journey by liking and subscribing right now. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need them more than they realize. And as you listen, think about where you are hearing this from. Because this story began in a forgotten roadside cafe, but it will not end there. Share the name of your country in the comments and become part of a story that crosses borders, fear, and silence, guided by a dog who refuses to let the lost remain unseen. The diner sat where the desert slowly swallowed the highway, a lonely outpost of faded paint and flickering neon surrounded by sand, wind, and silence. Heat shimmered off the pavement even as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in dull orange and bruised purple tones that matched Daniel Hayes' exhaustion. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee, old grease, and dust carried in by passing boots. The hum of an aging refrigerator blended with a tired country song leaking from a cracked speaker, creating a background noise that felt heavier than silence. Officer Daniel Hayes sat alone in a turquoise booth that had seen decades of strangers come and go, yet none as broken as the man sitting there now. His uniform was wrinkled, stained with sweat and dirt, no longer the symbol of authority it once was, but a reminder of failure he could not escape. In his hands, Daniel held a photograph that had begun to curl at the edges from being clenched too tightly for too long. The image showed his 8-year-old son smiling wide, missing one front tooth, eyes bright with trust. That photo had been taken 3 days before the boy vanished without a trace. Since then, Daniel had barely slept, barely eaten, barely existed as anything other than a father chasing shadows. His eyes were bloodshot, his face hollowed out by fear and guilt, and his hands trembled slightly even when resting on the table. Every muscle in his body ached from hours spent searching parks, alleys, abandoned buildings, and back roads that led nowhere. The waitress had tried earlier, offering warm words and a free refill, but even kindness felt unbearable when hope was slipping away. She watched from behind the counter now, knowing better than to interrupt a man unraveling in slow motion. Daniel's coffee sat untouched, growing cold, just like every lead he had followed since the Amber Alert went out. His radio crackled occasionally, each burst of static followed by the same words he dreaded hearing again and again. No updates, no sightings, no progress. Each report felt like another door closing somewhere he could not reach. Outside, the world moved on without mercy. Trucks passed in the distance. The wind dragged sand across the empty parking lot. The sun continued its descent, stealing daylight 1 minute at a time. And with it, the fragile window of hope Daniel was desperately clinging to. He leaned back against the booth, closing his eyes, trying to breathe through the tightness crushing his chest. He tried to pray, but the words refused to form. He tried to think like an officer, calm and logical, but fear drowned every rational thought. Nothing in his years of service had prepared him for this helplessness. Daniel whispered his son's name under his breath, the sound barely audible over the diner's hum. Fathers were supposed to protect their children, and tonight he felt he had failed. The silence grew heavier, and the truth settled deep in his bones. They were running out of time, and he had nowhere left to look. He did not know that fate, in the form of a small girl and a watchful dog, was already stepping through the diner door, ready to change everything. The moment Lily and Shadow stepped fully into the diner, something invisible shifted in the air, subtle yet undeniable. Shadow's posture changed almost instantly. His head lowered slightly, ears angled forward, body still but coiled, like a drawn bow waiting for release. While the other patrons glanced over with mild curiosity, Shadow did not look at them at all. His focus cut straight through the room and locked onto Daniel with unnerving precision. His dark eyes studied the officer, not with excitement or aggression, but with recognition, as if he sensed a gravity beyond ordinary sadness. As Lily rested her hand on his neck, Shadow's breathing slowed, deep and measured, nostrils flaring as he tested the air. He was not reacting to noise or movement. He was reading something far more subtle: fear, desperation, loss. Daniel felt it before he understood it, a strange prickle running up his spine as the dog stepped closer, paws silent against the diner floor. Shadow's tail remained rigid, unmoving, not wagging, not tucked, simply alert. His ears twitched once as the radio crackled faintly. When Daniel placed the small blue hoodie on the floor, the change in Shadow was immediate and intense. He did not rush forward. Instead, he froze, muscles tightening beneath his thick fur. His head dipped slowly, reverently, as if approaching something fragile. The first inhale was shallow and cautious. The second was deeper. The third was powerful and deliberate. Shadow's entire body responded. His back stiffened. His ears snapped upright. His breathing shifted into rapid, controlled bursts. A low sound vibrated in his chest. Not loud, but strong enough to silence the room. It was recognition. Shadow circled once, nose skimming the floor, mapping the scent as if drawing an invisible line. His body angled toward the diner door without hesitation. The world around him no longer mattered. Shadow returned to the hoodie for one final inhale. This time, his reaction was different. His lips pulled back slightly, teeth barely visible, not aggression, but concentration. His tail lifted higher. Then Shadow snapped his head toward the door and barked once, sharp and commanding. Chairs scraped. Someone gasped. Shadow lunged forward, claws clicking against tile, pawing at the door with urgent insistence. His body vibrated with energy restrained by training, not chaos. This was instinct, not guesswork. Daniel realized the dog was not searching randomly. He was following something real and alive. Lily spoke with trembling certainty. Shadow had found the trail, and every second mattered. The door swung open, and the heat of the diner vanished behind them as Shadow surged forward into the fading daylight. His movements were disciplined and controlled, charged with urgency rather than panic. His nose hovered inches above the cracked pavement, tracking a path no human eye could see. Each step carried intention, every shift of his shoulders signaling that the trail was fresh and alive. Daniel followed without thinking, his legs moving on instinct as his heart finally remembered its purpose. The parking lot stretched wide and empty, bathed in long shadows cast by the sinking sun. Shadow crossed it diagonally, weaving past parked trucks and abandoned shopping carts without hesitation. His ears flicked constantly, filtering out sounds that did not matter. Lily ran beside Daniel, breathing shallow but steady, her eyes locked on Shadow's body language. She knew the signs, and Shadow was no longer searching broadly. Shadow reached the edge of the lot, where asphalt gave way to dirt, weeds, and scattered gravel. His pace slowed as his tracking shifted from speed to precision. He inhaled deeply, then angled his body toward a narrow service road behind the diner. Daniel felt adrenaline surge as Shadow barked once, low and sharp, confirming the direction. The trail was moving away from town. Daniel raised his radio, voice tight but focused, calling in their position as distant sirens began to respond. Shadow did not wait for backup to arrive. He crossed the road and entered an alley lined with rusted dumpsters and broken fencing. The air changed immediately, thick with oil, metal, and decay. Shadow adjusted his path with subtle movements, cutting cleanly through the confusion of competing scents. The alley opened into an overgrown field stretching toward the outskirts of town. Tall weeds swayed in the evening breeze, masking subtle disturbances in the ground. Shadow plunged into the grass, body low and tail rigid, urgency unmistakable. Daniel struggled to keep pace, boots catching on uneven earth, but he refused to slow. Every movement Shadow made screamed that this trail was not old. Halfway across the field, Shadow skidded to an abrupt stop, forcing Daniel and Lily to halt behind him. Shadow's body stiffened instantly, ears locked forward, breathing deep and rhythmic. The silence stretched unnaturally, heavy with anticipation. Daniel dropped to one knee, scanning the surroundings as his pulse roared in his ears. Shadow lowered his head toward faint indentations barely visible in the grass. Fresh tire tracks emerged from the flattened grass, the dirt still loose and unsettled. Shadow followed them slowly, analytically, mapping direction and distance. His movements were deliberate, no longer fast, but absolutely certain. He barked again, louder this time, confirming what Daniel already feared. Someone had been here recently. As Shadow resumed his pace, the tension escalated with every step they took. Daniel could feel certainty replacing doubt inside his chest. Backup sirens grew louder behind them, but Shadow remained far ahead, leading without hesitation. The field dipped toward darker ground, where shadows gathered more densely. Whatever lay ahead was close, and Shadow knew it. Near the edge of the field, Shadow slowed again, his nose lifting from the ground to test the air. His steps became cautious, his body tightening as if bracing for danger. Lily noticed immediately and whispered that Shadow was sensing something nearby. Daniel's hand clenched as the realization hit him. They were not alone. The field gave way to broken fencing, twisted scrap, and the dark outline of an abandoned tire yard. Shadow stopped at the boundary, muscles taut, tail raised. A low vibration hummed through his chest, restrained but powerful. The trail did not end here. It concentrated. The truth was closer than Daniel dared to hope. Shadow burst through the broken fence with explosive force, his body surging forward as every instinct aligned into one clear command. His paws tore across uneven ground, gravel and dirt scattering beneath him as he locked onto the true trail. The hesitation was gone, replaced by pure certainty. Daniel followed without thinking, legs burning and breath ragged. This was where everything would be decided. Beyond the fence, the land dropped into a shallow ravine choked with weeds and scattered debris. Twisted scrap metal glinted faintly like buried bones in low light. Shadow weaved through obstacles without slowing, nose low then lifting to read the air. He was no longer tracking where someone had been. He was hunting where they were going. Lily struggled to keep pace on the rough terrain, but never looked away from Shadow. Daniel steadied her briefly before pushing forward again. Sirens wailed faintly behind them, far away and growing. Shadow pulled them toward a darker stretch where the ravine narrowed. Dense trees waited ahead like a wall of shadow. At the tree line, the air turned cold and damp with the smell of soil and decay. Shadow slowed, lifting his head to test the air with deep breaths. His tail rose stiff and high like a warning signal. Daniel felt tension surge through his body instantly. Lily whispered that the fear was close. Shadow growled low and controlled as he moved deeper between the trees. Moonlight broke through branches, casting fractured shadows across the forest floor. Every snapped twig felt threatening. Shadow moved slower now, every step measured. He stopped suddenly without warning. Shadow froze completely. Muscles coiled tight and ears locked forward. Daniel stopped behind him, heart pounding violently. Shadow stared toward a small clearing where the ground looked disturbed. The silence felt unnatural. Then a faint sound drifted through the trees, a small broken cry carried on the night air. Daniel recognized it instantly and whispered his son's name. Shadow lunged forward with a fierce bark. Daniel and Lily followed without hesitation. Pain and exhaustion vanished completely. They reached a partially buried storm shelter hidden under dirt and brush. Shadow clawed frantically at the bent metal door. Daniel dropped to his knees, tearing away soil with bare hands. He shouted for his son, voice breaking. Shadow forced his snout inside the opening. A small, trembling hand appeared through the opening. Daniel sobbed as he wrenched the door free. Inside, his son lay curled against the cold metal wall. The boy's face was streaked with dirt and tears. When he saw Daniel, he cried out softly. Daniel pulled his son into his arms, holding him tightly. He whispered reassurance again and again. Shadow stood guard beside them, body positioned protectively. Lily knelt nearby, tears streaming freely. For a moment, the world felt whole again. Shadow's ears snapped toward the trees behind them. His body stiffened instantly. A sharp bark exploded from his chest. Movement broke from the shadows. Someone was running. The kidnapper fled wildly from the tree line. Officers burst into the clearing shouting commands. Daniel yelled for the man to stop. The man ran harder in panic. Shadow launched forward without hesitation. Shadow closed the distance in seconds. The man tripped and fell hard. Shadow pinned him with precise, trained force. The dog growled inches from his face. Officers snapped handcuffs on quickly. Shadow released only when commanded and returned to the child. He pressed his head gently against the boy's side. Daniel held his son, shaking with relief. The nightmare was over. The hunt had ended. The forest no longer felt like a place of fear once the handcuffs clicked shut and the danger was pulled away into the darkness. The night air softened as if the land itself finally allowed itself to rest. Daniel remained on his knees, holding his son tightly. He was afraid the miracle might vanish if he let go. The boy's breathing slowly began to steady. Officers moved carefully around them with lowered voices and dimmed flashlights. Radios no longer crackled with urgency. Paramedics knelt beside Daniel and spoke gently. A warm blanket was wrapped around the boy's shoulders. The forest felt respectful and quiet. Shadow stayed close throughout the entire moment. His posture finally relaxed, and his breathing slowed. Mud and leaves clung to his fur like evidence of the journey. His eyes were calm and no longer searching for threats. He watched until the boy's fear fully faded. Lily approached quietly and knelt beside Shadow. She wrapped her arms around his neck and rested her forehead against his fur. Her shoulders shook as the weight of the night released. Shadow leaned into her without hesitation. The bond between them felt unbreakable. Daniel looked up at Lily and Shadow with gratitude etched across his face. His voice broke as he thanked them for saving his son. Lily responded softly with quiet certainty. She said, "Shadow finds the ones who are lost." The words settled deeply into the night. The boy shifted in Daniel's arms and reached toward Shadow. His fear had been replaced by wonder. Lily nodded gently in encouragement. Shadow stepped closer and lowered himself. A small hand pressed into the dog's fur. Shadow responded with a gentle nudge and a slow, calm tail movement. The boy smiled faintly for the first time. Daniel watched with tears in his eyes. Nothing else in the world mattered in that moment. The night finally felt safe. Sirens echoed faintly as the ambulance doors opened nearby. Daniel stood carefully without releasing his son. Paramedics guided them forward with quiet care. The boy looked back one last time. He whispered Shadow's name. Shadow tilted his head as if understanding the farewell. His ears flicked gently in response. The ambulance doors closed slowly. The sound echoed briefly through the trees. Then silence returned. Daniel remained beneath the trees with Lily and Shadow. Exhaustion settled into his body at last. It was no longer hollow, but earned. He rested his hand on Shadow's head. His touch was steady and grateful. Daniel said Shadow brought hope back with him. The forest no longer felt like a place of terror. Fear had been faced and overcome here. Love had found its way home. Shadow stood silently as proof of that truth.